Our lives are journeys of incomplete information. We cannot foretell the future before it happens. And so a freshly minted college graduate will set off into a place with great hopes, but not be able to know for sure how things will work out. An individual or a couple may decide that they are tired of working for someone else and go into business for themselves, but the success of that business is far from assured. A couple will be on the verge of having their first child and do all kinds of preparation for being parents, but know very little about what is to come. And in some instances, not knowing what is coming is exciting. But in other cases, I think that it is better not to know all that is to come, because we might not end up going ahead if we knew everything that lay in store. And so, what we hear in this morning's gospel is a confirmation that comes well after one of those instances in which life was full of incomplete information. All the way back in the beginning of Jesus' ministry, he called individuals to become his followers, but there was no exhaustive job description that was provided for them. There was no 5-year plan of all the steps that were going to occur. He made invitations like, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of people." But the references were vague, and what was asked of them was of their trust in placing themselves in his care. At Jesus' baptism, there was, in a sense, a confirmation of his identity with words that are similar to the ones that we have heard in this transfiguration story. Jesus was baptized, and in one version of the gospel account of that incident, a voice came from heaven and said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." At this transfiguration, another voice comes and said, "This is my Son, my chosen one, listen to him." But in between those two episodes, a lot happens. Much happens in Jesus' life, much happens especially in the lives of those who did choose to place their trust in him and to become his followers. And they did so not because there was a guarantee of success, not because there were explicit promises of reward, but they did so because they felt drawn to be associated with him, and they were hopeful that this might be the one that had been expected of old. You and I may have had similar experiences earlier on in our lives in which we were presented with more than the disciples were presented with. We were presented with perhaps the experiences of someone else that we trusted who shared with us their experience of being in relationship with God. We may have heard a few Bible stories about the steadfastness of God, about the exploits of Jesus, about the assurances of God's unconditional love. We may have had something somewhat akin to a mountaintop experience, perhaps immature in a beginning kind of way, but nevertheless appealing and that beckoned us to go further and deeper. But the choice that we were presented with was similar to those first disciples in this respect, that we were asked to place our trust in God's provision for our lives without any specific description of all that would happen. That the life of faith beckoned to us but was full of incomplete information. And so it is very, very helpful more than helpful, very necessary for us to have experiences throughout our journey of relationship with God in which that trust that we have chosen to place in God through Christ is confirmed. And that's what the story of the Transfiguration is. It's a confirmation story. It's a story of being at a particular time in a particular place and having a visceral, sensory experience of the presence of God that is out of the ordinary to say, you have chosen well. The trust that you have placed was on point. You have directed the attentions and the energies of your life in the right place. Your choice has not been in vain. So Jesus is standing upon this high hill. When you are in Israel, Palestine, there are really no mountains. But he's standing on an elevated place that is both a geographical reality, but is also a symbolic representation of going up to this meeting place that is a little closer to the presence of God. And 3 disciples are invited to go with him, Peter and John and James. These 3 are a part of several more significant experiences of Jesus' revelation. And this is perhaps the pinnacle of all of them. And as they are up there, Jesus is engaged in prayer as he is inclined to do from time to time for his own refreshment. And then the glory breaks out. Then there is this bright illumination around him and upon him, and all of a sudden these 2 giants appear with him, giants of their ancestry, Moses and Elijah, and they are not accidental figures. One represents the tradition of the law, that is Moses, the one who, in the first passage that we heard read, was the recipient of the commandments on Mount Sinai, bringing them as God's chosen representative to the Hebrew people as they were journeying in the wilderness to confirm on that occasion that God was with them and that they were being drawn into a relationship that was twofold. The first 4 commandments being explicitly centered on right relationship with God directly. The latter 6 commandments having to do with relationship from God's people one to another. And so Moses is there, and that is a confirmation of Jesus' identity in the lineage of those who have come through the line of Moses. Elijah is there also, and he is representative of the prophetic tradition. Those who accepted an explicit call to be God's spokespeople, to be God's representatives, and to make plain God's desires and intentions for humanity through the ages. And so Jesus as well takes his place among the prophets as the one who came and didn't speak for his own opinion alone, but spoke as the incarnate Christ, as the one that God had sent into the world. And what must it have been like to be Peter and John and James and to see the one whom they had placed their lives in the hands of confirmed in this undeniable way, both visually and by association with Moses and with Elijah. And so Peter gets really excited and he goes, we're going to make some dwelling places. And his desire is to try to hold on to the moment, to try to make this awesome, inspiring experience that they were having last as long as it possibly could. But the purpose for the Transfiguration was not to create an alternate reality that they could stay in forever. It was instead for confirmation, for their own edification, that the path that they had chosen, even though it was not guaranteed, was the right path. And that the Lord that they had acknowledged as being associated with God was, in fact, that true Lord. You and I need those experiences as well. There are times in our lives in which it is easy to be followers of Christ. And then there are the other times in which we wonder, am I on the right path? I'm not getting all the information I need. I'm not hearing responses to my prayers that clarify for me how I'm supposed to move forward. And so we need those times in which God draws close to us and we tell stories to one another about spiritual encounters that we have had in which we felt to the depth of our being that God was there with us. Yes, not only life is a journey of incomplete information, but also faith. That sometimes if we knew everything that was going to be involved, we might be tempted to shrink back and not to go into the risky places that God is beckoning us to go into. But we have just come through and to the completion today of another season called Epiphany, in which revelation upon revelation, miracle and act of great power was recounted through the stories that we have heard in these last many weeks. And those occasions become marker posts, milestones in this journey that provides for us that assurance that the choices that we have made to locate ourselves in the trust and the care of God were the right choices. These are the assurances that we hold on to and that we treasure. And while none of us knows from here on out what the future will hold for us, what being reminded of Jesus' transfiguration does for us is it allows us to reconfirm our confidence that we are on solid ground with God in our lives, no matter where we go and no matter what comes to us. We're about to enter into a new season of Lent this coming Wednesday. And as we go into that new season, may we carry this assurance that God is with us at all times and in all places, as we move from the spectacle and the majesty of God working outwardly in and among the lives of people towards an introspective journey, towards more of a reflective journey of faith. May we carry consistently that confidence that we are associated with a God of all ages, a God of unconditional and infinite love, a God of deep caring and provision. That is what I trust those first disciples experienced in the Transfiguration and reflected upon on many occasions throughout the rest of their lives, that even though the future was uncertain, that their relationship with God was fixed and was certain, and that it was a source of great strength and assurance for the rest of their lives. May it also be for the rest of your life and mine. Amen.